because most of my schools.
Welcome to the October 10th, 2023 special session / public work session. This is Joseph Cilio, President of the Board of Education speaking. Thank you for attending in person or through Zoom. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do notice if today's meeting has been served to all members of the Board of Education pursuant to the requirements of law. Tina, will you please take attendance? Present. Present.
Present.
Excused absence.
Present. Present.
Amy McLaughlin, Assistant Superintendent for Education and Leadership Development.
Present.
Judy Barber, Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction.
Present.
Yes, Terry Hand, Stewart School,
Present.
and Samantha Atlantic, Coordinator of Social Studies, yes.
Present.
Thank you. May I have a motion that the Board of Education accepts the agenda for October 10th, 2023 special session as presented?
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. To make more efficient use of the meeting time, the board has authorized the use of a consent agenda as part of the meeting agenda. The consent agenda allows for one motion to approve multiple items and such items as identified on the agenda provided. The president of the board will ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda and will ask board members if they wish to have a discussion or clarification on specific items contained within that agenda. Following the discussion, the board will then vote on the consent agenda. In addition, a board member may request to have an item removed and voted on separately. Be it resolved that the Board of Education approves the consent agenda, which includes personnel matters, items F1 through F3. All in favor? Aye. Motion that the Board of Education adjourns the special session.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. At this time, we'll move on to the presentation, which is on project-based learning.
Thank you, Mr. Cilio. So this evening, we'll be sharing some of our work, which we started 3 years ago. And again, the focus is on curriculum, a significant factor of our work when we work with our students. So we'll provide you an update with our goals for the year. One is on really sharing with you the interdisciplinary connections that we're making, and then also balanced and diversified assessment planning. And again, this work started, this is our 3rd year of our work. And I have to really have to share, this is probably some of the best work that I've seen in my career that's happening here in Garden City. And our colleagues that are here, especially our coordinators took this to the next level. And they started this in the 3 years ago, and every year, and it's gotten stronger and stronger. This year, we also have our principals as well. This year, really, our focus has been on building our instructional leadership team, making them even stronger and continuing this work. So I do want to thank our curriculum coordinators that are here tonight, and then also our principals, our administrators at the building level. This work that's happening here, they're shaping the work for now, but also for the future, which is really important for us. And I have been able to go into classrooms and see this work in action. So, Ms. Barbera, who will be leading this discussion tonight, this work, she has been involved with this work since we started 3 years ago. So this is actually has been pretty good for this work to continue. You've had one meeting already with the whole team. And I think the series of meetings are set, and then work happens in between. Summer work was all part of any new curriculum work we have been involved with. It goes through a process. And I think that process is a wonderful one that we have. So last year, I think it was April or May, where Angela Laylor was here with all of you and he presented the work. So this is a continuation of that for this year. So Judy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. I'm going to position myself here so that I can just advance slides. Everybody can see. And thank you again for such a thorough introduction. I feel like we could probably skip a few slides, but I won't do that. So again, this is there. You will hear the term project-based learning. I heard that mentioned in the introduction. But this is really a little bit broader than that. It's really an update on our curriculum design work and with a focus on where we are this year and also how this is already impacting our classroom instruction. The structure of the presentation is such that there will be a little bit of an update, year 1 and year 2. A more intense focus on the work of year 3. And then the best part of the presentation will be towards the end, where you'll actually get a glimpse into how some of this work is impacting student learning. There'll be some natural places for pause. I'll let you know when that happens. But certainly if you need any clarification as we're moving through this, please don't hesitate. So first slide, you see basically our year 1 outcomes. Again, this was in 21-22. And as Dr. Sinha mentioned, even though this is my first year in this particular role, I would have been involved with the team and in the process since its inception. So if you just glance down the bullets on that first slide, I will go ahead and talk a little bit more in depth about each one of them on the next 3 slides. So you see right in the beginning, defining purpose. And so we are very careful in this work that we make sure always to start with why. The statement of purpose is actually it's a little bit longer than that. If you all remember, we drafted, it probably took us a few meetings to feel really comfortable with what we came up with. But now we've also synthesized that and pulled it back into what I believe is one very powerful statement. Let me give you just a second to read that. You'll notice that there are 3 intended audiences that will benefit from this work. They're in bold. So our faculty, certainly in turn our students, and eventually to provide a level of clarity for all stakeholders, certainly including our parent community. You also notice in that statement of purpose a reference to high quality curriculum. And I think we have to be really careful that we have at least some common understanding of what we mean by that. And that's been really a lot of the work is around calibration. This is not new for any of us. All educators know about curriculum, but to have a more calibrated understanding of it really makes the work much more systemic. I know that, again, as Dr. Sinha mentioned in her introduction, the author of this particular model, Angela Laylor, is now really a very significant partner in the work here in Garden City. The second bullet for year 1 was the development of what we refer to now as our curriculum articulation document, also known as the CAD. We love acronyms in education. And so what you see on this slide is a screenshot of what we call the annotated version of the curriculum articulation document. That's really the first page of it. It's a couple of pages long. But again, the whole point here is that with an annotated version of the document, it really helps to establish not only common language, but a common understanding of what we mean by that language. Again, the people that are sitting here tonight, many of them had significant role in drafting this original document.
Ask a question real quick. Is this posted anywhere outside of the presentation for folks? Or at least the snapshot here of the curriculum articulation document,
In the presentation.
just in the presentation. Okay, thank you.
It's accessible to all faculty members. Great question. As we broaden, not only deepen the work, but also broaden the work. So really every staff member in the district has had some level of learning around both the purpose for this work as well as the process. So that was year one. That's a natural place to pause. Anybody else have a comment or a question? Okay, so you see lots more bullets in year two. We got very busy in year two. And so again, just a minute for you to scan the bullets there. And now I'll pull out just a couple of them to add a little more specificity. You notice that we refined the curriculum articulation document. Again, we kept calling it a draft, but we were very careful that as people began using that document for their planning, that there had to be some level of modification. This is a little tricky because, yeah, you want to make sure that people really can make connection with the document, regardless of the discipline or the grade level. At the same time, you really want enough consistency that anyone in the district, any faculty member can pick up a unit of study and and be able to access the information that's there. So it's a real a struggle, but we've done it, I think, to just maintain that balance that, yes, you sometimes can do some modification, but not to the point where now I'm the art teacher and I pick up a numeracy unit and I'm not quite sure how to look at this. Okay, so we did do a lot of embedding hyperlinks out to resources because, again, we were trying to keep the work very manageable. And we also talked about how you would use this structure in different levels. So we have everything from a level 1, which is really just kind of an overview. Here's the story of this unit. It's kind of a one-pager. Down to then the next level, level 2, where you actually chunk it out. So you can see the core learning experiences that kids will have within this unit, all the way down to level 3, which is really more daily lesson planning. So that image on the bottom, that's kind of one of my favorites. I sometimes refer to myself as the M&M gal. I think with all of this sophisticated, complex work, you just have to strive to keep it meaningful work, but also manageable work. And that's what really enables us to sustain these efforts. The other thing that happened during year 2 is we moved forward with the concept of design teams. Okay, so design teams were really involving our curriculum leaders with specific faculty, some of them grade level groups, some of them department groups. And those faculty members actually sat in design mode together, coming up with or refining some of their units of study. Again, I want to be careful that this is not about creating a whole new system. It's creating a system, but the content of the system is really the curriculum that is already implemented here in this district. Just always looking to just refine it a bit. And those design teams actually drafted units of study that then were piloted in certain classrooms. Always watching out for opportunities and for capacity. Tom, yeah, and yes.
What did you learn? I guess, can you give an example of something you learned in this process that you thought maybe we were doing better, or something the design teams pointed out that needed improvement, enhancement, change, whatever word you'd like to choose? Probably better than me, but had what was the result of this, or can you give an example?
So I think that, thank you for asking that question. I think that what we learned is that collective efforts can be really, really powerful. And that it's not about people not doing good work. People are doing very fine work here in this district, obviously. But it's around maybe just a little, a level of calibration coming together around the work in a way that really can make it even more impactful in the classroom. So I'll give you just a brief example. We learned that if we stayed consistent enough with level 1 planning, then your 3rd grade teacher could take a look at the story of 2nd grade units and 4th grade units and have a much better sense of kind of where they fit in that continuum. So a lot around, yes, horizontal articulation. So you have a greater level of consistency, regardless of who the teacher is, which building this is. But even more than that, the vertical articulation. Knowing that we're building upon what kids have already bring into the classroom setting.
Judy, how many design teams were there and how many faculty members were on the total team? I'm trying to get the
Yeah.
numbers so we all understand.
And I don't know if I could give you, I can tell, Jeanette, you have it? No?
I don't have a number. There were a good number over the year because we would have one group of teachers working in the morning with coordinators and administrators and another group in the afternoon. And that happened multiple times over the year. So I don't have a number, but it was a really dynamic and engaging group to work with and, sort of lift this work off and make it real, take it off of just an annotated template and create real actionable units.
And the team would consist of 4 to 5 teachers on the team roughly?
So it's usually between 3 and 5. It would
Yep.
include
Mhm.
regular ed, special ed teachers, a coordinator. It included our technology staff developers often. Lauren Lavelle, Mike DeVola were involved. I mean, they brought different skill sets to that and talked about ways to advance it.
All the different stakeholders.
Yes, thank you.
And what about the summer, Jeanette?
Yeah, we're getting to
Summer
that.
yeah.
Hold on just a minute. I could tell you very specifically about the design teams that are planned for this year because we're right in the middle of that process right now. And you'll see that in year 3. But last year there were, as Jeanette just shared, many teachers involved, but at different levels. We were very careful to make sure that we were watching for opportunities, bandwidth, readiness, not trying to force something, right? Too hard.
And we did this from grades 2 to 12?
K to 12.
K to 12, K to 12. Yeah. So here's what Dr. Sinan just mentioned, right? Once by the end of year 2, it really felt like we had significant work, both in terms of the process and the products that were being generated, that there was confidence in saying, okay, here we go, summer curriculum writing, done that forever here, right? But now there was a more specific process and expected product out of those projects. Not only the writing projects themselves, but also the professional learning that went around it. And Jeanette, I think you were the one that actually partnered with Angela for a session so that teachers, before they started their writing project of the summer, actually came in and worked for a day, just making sure they were really comfortable with the process and the structure.
Yes, we offered a curriculum articulation in service course that teachers attended the last week of June and spent time, again, building capacity with both the document and the philosophy behind it, and then creating units of study for their grade and or course level that they would then share with colleagues. So curriculum was written through both the course as well as summer curriculum writing projects.
I just went back a couple of slides and I'm saying, you know what you forgot to put on there, Judy, is that really every faculty member in the district had a certain level of exposure in year 2, because at the building level, there were faculty meetings and there were a couple of actually extended PD sessions, if I remember that correctly. I think there were 2 of them over the course of the year. So it isn't just about people that were design teams and willing to pilot work. It was much broader than that. That was also an outcome of the year 2 work. Okay, we're at a natural pause place again. Everybody good? Okay, so here we are. Year 3. I shouldn't say it, right? Year 3 is make it or break it. Now, when you're doing work that's this complex, I find that the first couple of years, people are very patient and, oh yeah. And then when it comes to year 3, because now you're really moving much more to scale, right? So we're very, very intentional in reinforcing the purpose. If I could tell you, I bet most of the people sitting in this row over here could probably have that sentence memorized. I won't call you out right now, but because if you're not careful about starting with why, the question is going to be asked, and usually in a defensive manner. You don't want that. Okay. So again, who is this for? Right now, it's a lot for us as faculty members trying to enable collective efforts. You're going to see in a couple of minutes that it's clearly beneficial to students because you're refining the design of the teaching and learning process in a very collaborative structure. And then not too far in the future is a lot of clarity for stakeholders because this is work that is absolutely publishable. All right, so we did expand, and Dr. Sena mentioned this in her introduction. We expanded our curriculum leadership team, and I think we did that at just the right time. You have to be careful. Lots of times, teams of 30 can be a bit overwhelming. So we had a smaller team for the first 2 years, but right now, and we've involved building leaders certainly throughout the process, but right now on October 3rd, we all met together as a leadership team. So it involved all of your directors and curriculum coordinators. It involved instructional technology, PPS, and all of the building leaders as well. We continue to really strive to identify opportunities, expand the design team structure. That hasn't happened quite yet. Our first state for that, it's sad that I kind of have these memorized, but November 14th is the first date for that. And again, in the introduction, you heard focus really on cross-disciplinary connections and balance and diversified assessment, which are really high-level kind of expectations. Okay. There's also a lot of thinking around intentional supportive unit implementation. So as people are in and out of classrooms, how do we really now take the work that we've started and make sure that we're putting that evaluation lens over it and having coaching conversations around it? So again, I forgot that I had these slides. Curriculum leadership team, that's who it involves now. And this is really all around capacity building. There's the focus on our work this year, cross-disciplinary connections, because we know how powerful that is for kids in the learning environment to be making connections, and also diversified and balanced assessment planning. And you see some of the models for assessment on that graphic. Okay, so where does this all go? It goes to really refining, I say celebrating and elevating the core learning experiences here in Garden City. So I'm going to give you just a minute to read that statement. And the language that is most common when people talk about high level of engagement in rigorous, but scaffolded, right? When we say rigorous, it's not, and then you're going to lock a lot of learners out. No, with good scaffolded support and authenticity, you hear PBL. And I have to say that in my world, PBL is project-based learning, but it's also problem-based learning. And in some of the very, very current research, they kind of shifted that to call it task-based learning. Okay, so that's clearly the desired benefit for kids. Everybody good so far? Okay, so one of my partners in presenting this evening is Ms. Hand, and she's going to talk for a little bit about, Oh, okay, all right. The first learning experience that we have up there, it was implemented actually in kindergarten last year, I believe in one of our primary schools. Again, this was a pilot experience. The Three Little Pigs. Dr. Sinha, do you want to talk a little? I remember that you talked to me about your experience in this classroom.
Sure. This was at Locust. And I believe that, actually we talked a lot about this particular unit and how students created, the house. And I think they were using hair dryers to see what would blow down or, the house would fall apart. But you can see kids were using their really what they have learned to think about, like the structures that they were creating. And, students read a book. It was truly interdisciplinary work that the kids were engaged in. And, when you hear kids talking, they want to learn by doing. So as the kids are getting older, it was in actually a Stewart. That was what our students tell us, that they learn best when they are doing and creating. So this was a great example of a unit in kindergarten.
Okay. So again, a unit that was already existed. And the question was, how could we take it and make sure that we are documenting it in a way that it could be replicated? So again, it's not about always creating something new. It's about taking something that actually you'd like to see, replicated. A little bit older, here they are.
All righty. This is an example of a fourth grade experience from last year that some classes at both Stewart and Stratford piloted. The work was created as a museum unit of study, which took on two different versions. At Stewart School, it was a museum of the American Revolution. And at Stratford, it was a museum of New York State. Both of these units had the same guided question: how might we design a museum for future fourth graders? Which meant that the museum needed to incorporate elements of the fourth grade curriculum throughout. The experience began with authentic visits. All fourth graders went on a field trip to a museum, and students were encouraged to visit museums with their families. Students were taught to visit museums looking through a different lens. They needed to consider layout, design, displays, and interactive elements. After some visits, students were asked to reflect on their time using questions such as, what makes a good exhibit and what makes you want to visit again? This reflection process is what really launched the unit work. Individual students or partnerships chose a topic of interest. They needed to research the topic, and during this process, some things that teachers discussed were how to generate good research questions and how to find credible sources. Once all of their information was gathered, students needed to determine the best exhibit to showcase their information. And this is where students really got creative. We saw such a wide range of exhibits. Visitors to the museum, which included other students, teachers, administrators, and parents, lots of parents, saw handmade costumes. They played board games and trivia games. They engaged in tech experiences through coded Kid-O-Yo games. I went home with recipe cards for food from the time and was asked to take pictures of me and my children making the recipes and scan into a code and upload the pictures for the child to see. There were even Q&A sessions with historical figures. Students were engaged. They were excited to complete the work and certainly to showcase what they learned. The amount of information students were able to give you at each exhibit was truly incredible, and the pride that students had in their exhibit and their classmates' exhibits was amazing to see. We're looking forward to expanding this experience and others like it as we continue this work, because these are the learning experiences that have great impact on our students and the units that they remember for years to come. I was outside at 5th grade recess the other day, and a group of children came up to me and asked during their recess, recess time.
Mm.
Are the fourth graders going to get to do the museum this year? So they weren't even worried about
Yep.
what they were going to get to experience, but they wanted the fourth graders to have that experience that they had last year.
Sam?
Yeah.
Did you notice any learning difference, years past as opposed to this when you introduced it?
I think so. So at Stewart School, we did American Revolution. So we've been teaching American Revolution through the lens of New York State for years and years and years in fourth grade. The amount of information that students were able to take in and truly absorb and to be able to explain in their own words was incredible. It truly was amazing. The engagement, the excitement. This was at the end of the school year. Parents at the museum said, my kid couldn't wait to come to school today because they knew they were working on the museum project. All they want to do when they go home is work on their museum project. They spent so much time learning about it and they were truly excited. And, you know, it's so much more meaningful in a way like this than just sitting, taking notes, taking an assessment. And it was really nice to be able to see if you have a student who is in special education or in ENL or requires speech, those teachers were able to push in during this experience time so that they could be authentically working with the students in the class as they were working on the project to really help them move the work along. You know, speech was pushing in. How do you give appropriate feedback to your partner? Let's work on the conversational skills that you need to have when someone's coming up to your exhibit in the moment. So that's that transfer of skills we're always looking for across all of our areas. So that was nice to see also.
Thanks so much for the question. It was so good to hear Carrie be able to speak so emotionally and eloquently about that experience. And I hope you picked up, she said that it was slightly different in Stewart and Stratford, right? And we want to be careful that we maintain that level of choice, right? That what you're really looking to establish are equitable experiences for kids. They don't always have to be exactly the same. And honestly, for teachers to be able to learn from each other as they design things that are just a little bit different, but all with common focus. And as you said, the PBL focus. The thing about that is that it just brings so many disciplines together. And again, the authenticity and the level of engagement. So
Can I just add
Thanks
one
so
quick
much.
thing
Sure.
to that?
Sure.
Is, you know, this unit, I mean, I remember going into the classroom and I was so taken aback because of students were showcasing their skills. But I also want to point out is that this work did just happen. There was a lot of work happening in the background for this project to take place or this learning for kids.
Mhm.
Jeanette, you were involved in this.
Yep.
Our technology staff developers were involved with this. Many of you were involved in this.
Mhm.
So there was a real thinking through, and this project started I think in April during that break, all the way till almost the end of the school year. So that for students, for their learning, I don't think they'll ever forget this unit.
Yeah.
I really don't.
And I think one of the, you know, it's the reason why it's here tonight and connected to curriculum articulation is that process and just even the document helps give a focus and a framing to the conversations so that when we look at projects that are done in class, they're connected to the standards. This pulled in some of the computer standards that are coming, like it pulled in ELA standards. It pulled in a lot of different standards, speaking standards and reading to be doing the research. And while it's social studies driven, many other disciplines are fused here and represented as well. They're embedded in this unit.
And it was part of the impetus for establishing a focus around cross-disciplinary connections, because that's what you need to have in order to make this work, because otherwise there's just not enough time in the day, right? And we're still really challenged sometimes by feeling that this is kind of like an extra piece because there's never extra time. So how do you make sure that what you've got within it, right, is some of the real core experiences that, you know, every fourth grader needs to have?
The sneaky thing about
Yeah.
Is, it will, when a child is challenged in a particular subject, they latch on with the subject that they're strong in, and that's how they're doing it.
Absolutely, absolutely. All righty. So again,
Yeah,
that was.
I was just gonna,
Oh,
say,
yes. Thank you.
I appreciate the picture here. I think actually somebody in the crowd's granddaughter is in this picture. I was in the room for this museum day. It was an experience. I like the Q&A questions the most of it, even though it was not my child's, and I know she's not listening, so that's fine.
Thanks, Jim.
But she,
Angela, I'd like to know what you learned from the.
And I'll tell you, I pressed some of them because
Mhm.
they knew stuff. And I said, I'm just gonna push in this area and see. And they knew. And what was interesting was on the top left, when the kids came in, they thought that was 9/11 being represented as part of the history of New York. And it was,
Interesting,
and it was the
interesting.
and it was the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire at the turn of the century. And it was so, that was sort of like when the kids came in and said that, you just kind of understand what their frame of reference is.
Yeah.
And it was just sort of, the whole thing was really,
Yeah.
you know, awesome to see the kids and excitement. And
they
did-
get to pick their own. They get to pick their own, because I know there was a lot of different things. There wasn't any copycat
No, they got to pick what
programs
they
in there,
were
which I was surprised.
They were studying. They did some brainstorming around it. And as Ms. Hand said, you know, when they went to visit museums, they came back and shared pictures from museum trips and said, I like things where you put headphones on and you can hear someone talking. And I like when you get to press a button and see a timeline light up.
Right.
So one of the kids had coded something, so things were lighting up because they had liked that exhibit. And really what was great about it is they made all of this in school. So they were really all kid-made things. Like they could bring a little something in from home, but mostly this was constructed in school and it showed and it was wonderful.
That young lady in the top left corner will remember this.
Yep.
Immigration.
Yeah.
8th grade, and then hopefully the list is.
And the boys below her did Ellis Island immigration. So they have the, you know, the water, the Statue of Liberty was there. I think the ship was out of cardboard, but they had some Legos in there too. I mean, they were super creative in terms of how they created their exhibit.
But they're not only going to remember their own. They were so invested in their classmates' work also. Snack conversations were, what are you doing? What are you adding? How are you doing that? Where did you find that information? Because I need a little bit more. So they really pushed each other's thinking and wanted to know what they were doing for their project. We say there were Q&As with historical figures. I mean, they built frames to hold around their faces and you had to walk up and push the button for them to start talking to you. Like they really tried to think of it because maybe you wanted to do a Q&A, but I do too. So how can I make mine different from yours? So people still want to come to my exhibit also. And so they were really, really creative in the process.
They did.
Oh, they sure did.
I have to imagine that you all work tremendous amount of hours trying to set this in motion,
Right.
right? You maybe choreographed it, and there was times that you said, this didn't go the way I thought, right?
Oh,
Can you
there
share
were
any
projects
experience?
that the children were like, I want to do this topic. I'm set on this topic. Could not be more excited. We helped them find all of the appropriate research for it. And then they were like, I'm bailing. This is not working. This is not what I wanted. That's not what I wanted to find out about this. So they made a shift and they changed, or they got to the end and they were like, I have to present it as a board game. It's a battle. It should be a board game. And then they were halfway through the board game. And they're like, no one's going to want to play this. Or they're going to have to be at my exhibit for too long. So it doesn't make sense. So I need to rethink how I'm going to present it. That's part of the learning
Huge,
process.
huge. Yeah, yeah. So like a couple of things. First of all, talk about a different dinner conversation. What'd you do in school today? Not much, right? What'd you do in school today? Can't wait to tell you. Yeah. And going back on Mr. Necco's comment about, we all know that 4th grade, 7th and 8th grade, and 11th grade, right? Do I have the grades right, Jeanette? Right? 4th grade, 7th and 8th, and 11th. Okay. All of those connections, but they're in our heads. And yes, there's good conversation that always happens amongst faculty. But the problem is the conversation, it's up in the air and then it's gone. So documenting this, as challenging as that sometimes is just, it's so valuable. It doesn't replace the conversations. How many times have we said that, right? The curriculum articulation document is not intended to replace conversations. It's intended to really foster and promote deeper and richer conversations. Now, you look at those kiddos, when they get to 7th and 8th grade and when they get to 11th grade, boy, oh boy, we better not think we should start from the beginning with them. You good? Okay. We're going on to a different type of opportunity. Okay. Stay excited. Are you there? Are you with me still? Okay. So here was an opportunity that presented itself last year in the area of mathematics, and not just a classroom or two. We're talking about every classroom in the district, K2. Okay, so let me give you a minute. There's a lot of text on that screen. That's an excerpt from the Curriculum Hub. I just want you to read that before I say any more. Okay, so I'm not calling her on her this evening, but I'm going to mention Ms. Cardella said last year, I don't know, we're adopting a new primary instructional resource. She was very careful about the way that she described it. She did not say we're adopting a new curriculum. This might be a really opportune time to use our new curriculum articulation document and process, right, in this area. I went, I don't know. You think so? That's a lot of people, Christina. She said, I think we're up to it. Again, why? Because when you adopt a primary resource, there's altogether too much opportunity for people to think that that's the curriculum. And you're just going to go from page to page to page and everything will be fine, when we know that's not the case. So in K2 mathematics last year, I think curriculum articulation documents were at least started for every unit in all 3 of those grade levels in mathematics. And in addition to that, as the implementation of the new resource was, as that went on, that new implementation, there were resources that we needed to supplement. And so what a team of teachers working with Ms. Cardella was able to do was to actually pull together those resources through the lens of the curriculum articulation document. I'm watching time and I'm feeling like I can't go out to that site right now. Whoops, but I just did anyway. Okay, so what I have embedded in here is a link to the Curriculum Hub in the area of mathematics, where you would be able to see not only the actual it's down here on the bottom, isn't it? Here we are, okay? Use of the curriculum articulation document. Okay, but then additional resources that really are provided for teachers and for families to be able to do this with a level of confidence. So when we talk about opportunities, that's the kind of thing that we're talking about, right? There are times that there are new standards being adopted in a discipline. I can tell you right now that's happening in world language. So we're going to be doing a lot of work around world language this year, a new resource, a new course at the high school. This year is the first year that we're running a journalism course. So Ms. Kaufman, again, with a team of teachers, actually sat and worked in a design team last year to create that new course. And I'm not sure if I just go back here. I don't think so. Oh, of course it is. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. All righty, so moving right along to more photos and more of the PBL focus. Thanks, Jeanette.
The exploratory period in grade 6 is where the Genius Hour course is housed. And it is a project, it's an entire project-based course actually, and has learning experiences that are rooted in design thinking. Very similar to the 4th grade PBL, the museum, which was rooted in design thinking, where we gave kids the driving question there, how can I design an exhibit for future 4th graders? In Genius Hour, we ask kids to come up with their own driving question, which is not an easy task to do. But one of the things that I think is really wonderful about this course is that it is a place that we really work to cultivate in students the many attributes that we want to see them develop. Attributes like being collaborators, problem solvers, public speakers, creative, have perseverance. It's in a PBL course like this that those things, I mean, that is just at the heart of this work. And they develop those skills when they pick a topic that they care about, a passion project, a passion topic, an interest that they have that they want to delve into more deeply, either to learn about more themselves or to share information about a topic with others. In these photos, we see Caroline. She had done some work, I think it was at Stewart with the Hero Squad, and wanted to work through that organization to raise awareness about leukemia and lymphoma. She ultimately ended up doing a bake sale and created flyers and things of that nature. Kiara wanted the side hobby. She wanted to help kids who were in hospitals for long term and create different like toys and games and things that they could do to pass time. And Eric, who was interested in creating some sort of an exercise machine for when you were not doing too much movement, but you wanted to make sure you were staying fit and active. And through all of these projects, kids had to write a driving question. They had to do research. They had to ideate what would be the best way to raise awareness, raise money, design something. They had to really develop their executive functioning skills because all of these things took place over time. And how was I going to budget my time? They had to find a mentor that could help them. Eric, we had an assembly where the kids shared some of their Genius Hour projects, and Eric spoke really poignantly about the relationship he developed with his dad, who was his mentor in creating this. And other kids had faculty members who were mentors or people in the community in a similar field who helped them with their projects. So they developed skills to talk to people, to engage people, and then also present. You know, it's a unique class. And I really do feel like I want to give a shout out to the 6th grade teachers who embraced this opportunity, somewhat nervously, because it is definitely a little bit different. And Lauren Lavelle, who really served as a teacher leader in this course and doing summer curriculum work to help design it and have us implement it across the 6th grade and the middle school. I think it's in a course like this where kids have these kinds of learning opportunities where interdisciplinary connections are made via their projects. Again, they have to have research skills. Some kids took a math route, some kids took a sports route, but because I think, as you said earlier, when they pick something that they have an interest in, they just latch in. And while they might want to give up on research and something they don't care that much about, and they're sort of faking it here and there, they go the extra mile when they're doing that. And they also knew there was going to be an authentic audience for them to share their work with. So that raised the bar a little bit in terms of the amount of effort that they were putting in there. And I think that the skills that they acquire in a course like Genius Hour, where they're doing this work, they're transferable to other subjects when they need to do research, and they're just transferable to life as well. You know, we know when we ask employers or even colleges, what do you want to see in the people that you bring to your school or that you hire? They don't say, I want somebody who has all 5s on their AP exams. You know, I mean, it's nice to have that, but they talk about the attributes that they want in people to be creative problem solvers and collaborators and get along and all of that. And I feel like the project-based learning experiences, both starting in fourth grade, some in the works for other grades, and the sixth grade course really help develop those in kids in a safe place where they're willing to take risks. We really emphasize failing forward. Like, Carrie said before, if an idea didn't work, they changed course. And we see that in the Genius Hour course as well.
Jeanette, thanks so much. The benefit to the kids, you did such a fine job of making sure that, that you communicated that. I'm going to just piggyback and say, so what's the benefit for faculty? Right? There's only a select number of teachers who are really involved in that course. But when you document that course and then have others take a look at it, right? It just opens up possibilities. What might that kind of learning look like in other courses? Right? So that's really, from a systems perspective, that's what's so beautiful about the work that's going on here, because it's not that you have to create, like, we don't have anything. No, you look what you have. Whoa, how can we replicate that kind of learning for kids?
Can I just add one more thing?
Sure.
With this, the Genius Hour, is this our third year or second year?
It's our
Really?
we were talking about that time. It's our third year doing
Third
it.
year.
So we ourselves as designers
right.
of this course have gone through a
That's
series
what-
of,
yeah.
iterations of it to take what we've learned from one year and modify it and change it, and grow with the course as well.
I would really encourage our board members when students are showcasing, it is a wonderful thing to kind of see our kids present their ideas.
Last year, before we did it, we had a launch. Mr. Samuelson at the middle school had a connection to, didn't work for Google, Adobe, who was one of their educators and came in and talked about what this kind of work looks like at the corporate
And the
level
careers.
and launched it with examples. And then the seventh graders from the prior year spoke at the assembly to inspire the sixth graders. Because when we did it the first year, we weren't quite sure what was going to happen, but the kids some of them did pretty amazing stuff that they came back and spoke to the other kids. And even the kids who, might not have had a project that looked like this when it was done, we built in reflection pieces so they could talk about what they learned from it. And someone said, I didn't finish this year, but it's something I'd like to continue at some point. So it was a really interesting and unique experience to be part of, as on the educator side of it as well.
Okay,
so-
so this is our last model. That we're
If we jump to the high school, I think, as kids move through the middle school and high school years, we know that the level of rigor and the scope of the content, it just grows, right? It's more and more challenging. There's AP exams. And, as a teacher of history, I know the burden of that is of feeling like you just are not going to finish. So I think sometimes there's like a little bit of skepticism about where does this fit at that level? And I'll be honest, I think it's a little bit more challenging at that level because you have different things that are sort of weighing on you. But, as teachers and as students ourselves at one point in our lives, we all know that there's a possibility that could be just one moment in a teacher's class that changes you. There could be one moment in a teacher's class that inspires a student to want to be a historian or go into public service or study something in science and become an engineer or a journalist or a writer. And, we don't ever really know what that moment is because we teach something, we go on the next day. And the teachers of AP US History, there's 3 of them, they collaborated to design this podcast project. And the thinking behind it was, we've taught this whole year, maybe there's something that just interested them in the year, or maybe there's something in the news and current events that inspired kids. So let's task them to think about something that triggered them again. And it could have been a current event or something, and that captured their imagination, and take that event and trace its evolution through history. So students worked in groups to pick a topic, research the topic, and write and create a podcast. So some of the kids did things like, it feels like our politics today are really partisan. I wonder if it's always been like that. So one group of kids did a podcast on the evolution of political parties. They went back to George Washington's warning the country against political factions and what moments in history looked like when it was a tension convention between the parties, and traced it to modern day. Some kids looked at the role of the federal government in American society and wanted to look at Biden's infrastructure plan and the role of the federal government and trace it back to FDR and the role that he played in the New Deal. Some students looked at the impact of technology, the electric vehicles, and looking at the impact that a regular automobile had and other sorts of technology. And other kids looked at the drivers of American foreign policy. Is what drives us today the same as what drove us in 1945 or in 1900? And through their own research, they found connections to the past to look at the question that was posed: how can the past inform the present? And this project really required kids to make those connections. And in creating the podcast, they made it available again to an authentic audience. And their teachers actually create podcasts often themselves that they house on their AP US History Underground, chat about history. So they're good models for their kids, and
Very engaging.
they take pictures of when they're I was with the Model UN kids last year in Boston, and a lot of them were in APUSH, and they're like, we have to take pictures because we have to share it with our AP teachers, because they take pictures all around and create these podcasts about them. So it was just a really great learning experience post AP, where they got to pause on something that they just wanted to learn more about.
Opportunity.
Yep.
As a secondary teacher for years and years, I loved the AP classes after the exams, right? And that's right. This is when this happened, Jeanette, right?
Yep.
So it's looking for those opportunities. And I won't talk about some of the design teams that we're thinking about pulling together this year, but I will tell you right now that there are a couple of AP situations. And what we're really hoping that we might be able to achieve this year is a little bit more cross-disciplinary work. And the reason we think it's possible is because kids made those connections across disciplines last year as they were preparing for their seal of
I was just gonna
civic.
say,
Yeah.
Can I go off script a little bit and say one more thing?
We like off script.
So last year, we implemented the seal for civic readiness at the high school, which is something that's offered by New York State for kids who demonstrate their civic knowledge and civic participation. They have to earn a series of points in order to get the seal. And last year, we had 85 kids graduate with the seal of civic readiness. And one of the things that you have to do in order to earn the seal is you can write about a class that had a civic component to it, meaning it impacted your civic mindset, your civic thinking, action. And as part of, you can't just say, oh, I took this class, I should get the point for this. The kids had to write a reflection. So I read all of the reflections that they wrote, and we had a list of courses that we thought were a match for that. And I often lament with people when they talk about college and career readiness that we leave off the most important C, which is civic readiness. And the kids wrote about really eloquently their experience at AP Stats. And when they learned about polling and using statistics, how statistics can be used to manipulate what we think about things and the way you phrase questions matter. They wrote about their experiences in Project Lead the Way, where they had an opportunity to build things with disabilities, like they were giving back and taking an action. And they connected this. And they, of course, they wrote about AP government, AP macro, they wrote about Long Island, they wrote about a lot of social, but the fact that they wrote about business courses where they saw the impact of businesses on communities and how they help people. And the fact that they made this connection, it was really to read those over this at the end of the year before they graduated. And then I read them and, shared them with teachers who taught those courses. It was a really powerful moment. And to me, that's also a really excellent example of interdisciplinary connection, that all of our subjects prepare kids to be college, career, and civic minded when they leave here. And I just felt like that connects to this work too. So I wanted to share that.
So another opportunity, right? Sometimes with the opportunity that presents itself as a structure. No, we think that the seal is a really good thing for our kids. Oh, wait a minute. Let's talk about then how we can take what they showed us last year and really build it as something that can be replicated. And as Ms. Cardella, former AP stats teacher sitting over there, right? You had to hear the conversation between Christina and Jeanette at our leadership team meeting. I was like, I woke up this morning, Jeanette, I have to tell you, make me feel better. Cause I woke up this morning going like, oh, good, we're going to do curriculum presentation tonight. Like, I'm like, okay, Judy, like, relax a little bit. I don't think anybody was more excited than what you just heard from Ms. Volantic. And that excitement is contagious, right? With kids for sure, but absolutely with colleagues. So at the risk of, what time is it? Oh dear. Okay. So here are a few potential, you've heard about our thinking around this. So some next steps for us is we just want to make sure that we provide opportunities and support for as many staff members that are ready to take this dive with us. There are going to be 2 design cohorts this year. There are 2 days, a November, December date, and then there are 2 dates in the spring. And just so that you know, that's a very rich environment. It's a very highly supported environment. Angela, our partner, comes back in not only to facilitate during that day, but to give feedback to whatever is designed during that time as well. And we will continue with our curriculum leadership team. Again, we're a team of learners. We engage in the design process and also want to be able to carry it over into the implementation of these very, very fine units of study. The only thing that I didn't put up there that I do have to say is always thinking about connections to other district priorities. For example, the focus on learning spaces. You know, constantly pulling that in, thinking about, all right, so here's the unit, here's what kids would be doing. Wait a minute, what's the space look like for that? So connections with that, as well as MTSS and some of the other very, very fine systems that you already have structured here.
Emotional as well.
Oh,
Social emotional
yeah.
learning, which is huge.
Yeah, we didn't get into that. But when you look at the actual document, you will notice that there are discipline standards. There are also practices. And then the third piece is there are social emotional learning benchmarks and valued outcomes here in Garden City. Very, very fine work. So this is what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to build a structure. There's your structure. Notice it doesn't look like a brick house, right? And that throughout it, we continue to just try and stay balanced, keep it manageable, and keep it meaningful.
Thank you.
Say something. It was a lovely presentation. Thank you. And very, very informative. I just want to point out something about the Genius Hour that differed from the other aspects of this. And I did have 2 kids that went through the Genius Hour too. And this is definitely something that I had thought myself at the time, but also in comparing it to the different segments that you had. I think it's worth thinking about that. The Genius Hour just really was very notional, these projects. And I think that was a big weakness of it, because I think the kids went into it thinking, well, this is a great idea. It's not really going to happen. So it doesn't really matter. Because, you know, even just listening to my kids, I was like, well, that's not really workable. And they were like, well, it doesn't really matter because they already told us we're not going to do it. So whereas your other projects, someone built something, they had to see through the ramifications of what they were really going to do a deep dive on. It just felt like the Genius Hour was just sort of like a notional, oh, let me just talk about my great idea.
So we talked a lot about that. And this in the 3rd year, we definitely felt like there was some unevenness amongst the projects and what kids were doing and how to bring all of them to the same level of life. There were definitely kids who brought ideas to fruition and went out and did a bake sale or made a website and things like that. So we talked about and strategized ways to start the project a little bit earlier, look to strengthen mentor relationships with kids. So it is definitely something that we sense being in the classroom with kids, that little bit of unevenness of it. and we discuss ways to try to strengthen that. And I think in years 2 and 3, having seen other projects, gave kids different hooks to hang things onto, to think about things that were really then actionable. Because one of the things when kids have to create their own driving question, you know, initially they're like, what can I do a bake sale for? I'm like, no, we don't want to start. We want to think about what are you interested in? And then how do you partner that with something? And it doesn't have to be a bake sale. There were kids who, again, did projects that were finished and cookbooks and sewing things, and they shared. And then there were kids who didn't get that far, but and I don't know if it was true of your children, you know, but when we talked about it, we talked about, well, what are the things you learned throughout and what you have done differently? And one girl at the assembly said, I'm just gonna say, don't procrastinate. Like, I really learned that because it took me a long time to get here. So my hope is, and I hope it's true for your children too, that through the process, even if it didn't get where they wanted it to go, that there were some good learning experiences that were there. And we took feedback from the kids to strengthen those areas that you're mentioning. I don't know that will be perfect this year, but we look to sort of tidy that up a little bit too.
Well, I would be curious, just from a program's perspective, what percentage, and it sounds like it to me, what it looked like was, it was very specific, like a bake sale was very doable versus like an app was not doable, right? And so perhaps then that's just more about, okay, what kind of projects can we really have these kids be doing? And I think and I get the sense that the whole point is to do a deep dive in something, then maybe there has to be more hands-on by the guidance that they're getting and what is actually a doable result.
Right, no, I agree.
That really points to the fact that this is not his work. It's been rather sophisticated, but that the more we get feedback, right? Both from students as well as from faculty, and thank you in this forum as well, the better the work gets. Thank you.
I will say, first of all, thank you. I know a lot of hard work goes into this, and it's been going on for a couple of years. Excellent presentation, making us understand a little bit more about, you're taking something that's one-dimensional, whether it's a reading topic, and turning it into a three-dimensional project, right? That's the goal. You know, get the students to think out of the box, right? Become future leaders in an idea, and showcasing it, right? Their skills and their skill set, right? So I appreciate that. I think it's really complex, and the importance of you're all collaborating and figuring out how the previous teacher affects the future teacher. And I could tell you in the long game, it works. Whatever you're doing, keep up the good work, because this is my 13th year on the board, and my twins graduated, you know, a few months ago. So they went through all this. So all these
And they
projects,
got the seal for civic readiness.
and yes, one of them did. I should know which one, right? There's just, was it Andrew or Amanda?
Both got it.
They both got it. I should know this. Bad dad. Too much on dad's head. All right. So I guess what I'm going to say is all the effort you're all putting into it leads to a success story, right? They graduated, they went to college, and they're telling me, wow, that teacher prepared me. Wow, I'm so far ahead of my other peers. I said, why is that? She said, Garden City prepared us. I said, which parts? He says, different grades. I said, well, maybe you should come back and do some civic duty and explain them, right? To help the future upcoming students. So look into that. Maybe we can coach them to come back. But yeah, it's something that, even that maybe the Genius Hour isn't perfect. I think what I heard you saying is you're trying to find new ideas on how to make it better, right? Because it's an innovative idea from a few years ago. Some of those take a little longer to evolve into something more interested for them, or more of a project that's more meaningful, right? All ideas are great, so just keep innovating and ask the students what they could do. But I could see now why you like to be on these projects. So thank you for all the work you do in the background.
This hour.
I do too.
Yeah, thank you for all your hard work. Just to say it one more time. We have a few folks in the room who maybe want to ask some questions. So if you do, please step up and state your name and address. If anybody's interested. Quiet tonight. Oh, take the win. I think we all take the win. Sure. Yeah.
You know, before we move forward, I just wanted to thank everyone here, my colleagues here. This work is definitely very hard work, and this work really never ends. It's continuing, you know, what we were saying just even about the Genius Hour, continuing to refine it and to make it better and introducing something like the Genius Hour, because that's been new to us amongst other things that you heard tonight. What it made me feel, I feel like I wish I was back in school. I really, and I hear your passion. You're so passionate about the work that all of you are you know, engaged in. And I think and our teachers as well, many teachers have been involved in this good work. So really, I've seen it evolve the last 3 years. I couldn't be prouder. It's really wonderful work.
Yeah, this doesn't happen. I mean, the teachers are the teachers make the magic happen. I mean, this work on paper is on paper, but you know, it's the
Absolutely.
teachers who bring it to life with the kids in the classroom, which is fantastic and wonderful to see.
I have a question. I'm going to go off script here. President Cilio, did you have this when you came through Garden City School District?
I don't know. I don't recall, but I don't think so. I did one project in second grade, I remember, but I had to wear a wig as George Washington. So I guess it does stick in some way. Yeah. I'll bring it in next time.
So oftentimes in schools, when you ask kids what they remember is field trips, right? The field experiences. Our goal is that they remember the learning in the classroom as well, right? And Dr. Stenow said, works in progress, right, you guys? Whenever I say, ooh, can I take a look at you? Oh, yes, but Judy, it's a work in progress. All of this is work in progress and always will be. You're never really done.
Thank you again for everything.
Thank you.
And those that are not here tonight.
Yeah, sure.
So last thing, announcements. Our next Board of Education meeting will be October 24th at 8:15 PM here at the Garden City High School. At this time, I have a motion that the Board of Education adjourns.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye.